now, and this is of Thomas Malone, who is the founding director of the Collective Intelligence Laboratory at MIT. Let's go ahead and roll that video. Exactly what do you mean when you talk about collective intelligence?
So I like to use a broad definition of collective intelligence, which is groups of individuals acting collectively in ways that seem intelligent. Now, by that definition, there's been collective intelligence for a very long time, at least as long as there have been humans, because families, companies, countries, armies, all those are examples of groups of individuals that act collectively in ways that seem intelligent.
So if collective intelligence has always been there, what's new about the research you're doing in it?
Well, in the last few years, there have been some very new examples, some new kinds of collective intelligence. Think of Google, for instance. By this, I don't just mean Google the company, I mean the whole system of which Google is a part. Millions of people all over the world creating web pages, linking those web pages to each other. The Google technology harvesting all that knowledge so that when you type a question into the Google search bar, the answers you get often seem amazingly intelligent, at least in a certain sense of intelligence. Another example would be Wikipedia, where there, I think the most interesting thing is not the technology, though they use a very nice wiki software. What I think is most interesting about Wikipedia is the organizational design. Wikipedia has figured out a way to get thousands of people all over the world to collectively create a very large and amazingly high quality intellectual product with almost no centralized control, and by the way, for free, since they're almost all volunteers.
Now, problem solving is very important, but one difficulty is that people often have very different ideas about what the problems are. So can collective intelligence lead to a consensus on what is the problem that we're trying to solve?
Well, collective intelligence, again, exists today all around us. So a democracy, a political democracy, is one form of collective intelligence. We have ways of making decisions about what we will collectively do, even if we don't all agree on what the answer should be. We at least agree to abide by the group or democratic choice. So I think collective intelligence in that broad sense can certainly deal with these kinds of complex, ambiguous problems. The question is not just can they deal with them at all, the question is, are there new kinds of collective intelligence that can help us deal with these problems more effectively? Here, I think there are some interesting examples. For instance, one of the projects we're doing that I think is most interesting is a project to harness the collective intelligence of thousands of people all over the world to help come up with a plan for what we humans can do about global climate change. We think it may be possible to combine the kind of intellectual rigor of the Sims game for the whole planet and the power of discussion of a Wikipedia-like system for controversial topics, and the collective decision-making power of an electronic democracy on steroids.
And that was Thomas Malone, founding director of the MIT Collective Intelligence Lab. Bob, he spoke about Wikipedia a lot. I know you use Wikipedia a lot in your job. Do you consider it a good example of collective intelligence?
I guess at the moment, I would say it is a good example. Professor Malone brings up a lot of good examples there. Probably one of the things that I noticed through reading through some of Engelbart's work and being associated with some of the folks that know a lot about his work is that that we know that these are the early stages. So even though Wikipedia is a good example at the moment, we know that it's still sort of controlled tightly by a set of editors and protected from, vandalism and whatnot. But at the same time, there's a danger there or possibility that that it's not actually collective at all. That it's being tightly controlled, and it's not something that serves the larger group of people.
But isn't any organization started by just a few people?
Yeah, of course it is. So another one of Professor Malone's examples is Google. So I use Google too, use Google and Wikipedia both. These are good examples to start off with, and so I think that we shouldn't maybe start off by holding them up as an example, but as a sort of beginning stage, as a stage that is something that we're going to probably move beyond as these tools become better, collective intelligence tools become better, and become used by more people, because people have a lot of problems with both Wikipedia and Google.
So what kind of tools would you like to see in the next stage?
Well, I think that what's worked for us at the Tech Virtual, we use a sort of collective intelligence process towards creating museum exhibit designs. So we're able to bring a bunch of people together using some of the tools pioneered during Doug's work to give feedback about exhibit designs and get designs going and build teams in real time. And I think that's a good example. It's working on a very small level, but where you can put these tools to work.
Now, if you're talking about designing museum exhibits, for example, collectively, everyone has their input, but is the decision made collectively, or is there still one person who decides whether to use this idea or not?
There's probably one person that decides what's going to be used or not. That's true. What you do get, though, is a collective intelligence of input from how this person perceives it, how that person perceives it, how the next person perceives it, and then you can find problems out very quickly like that, just because that person will be able to view your design, give input, and all in real time be able to sort through these problems that you would never notice on your own. So I think that's a good example. Again, it's in a very tight group of people.
Does this work best on a small scale? Because you might say that democracy itself is a type of collective intelligence because people vote, and the people who are elected somehow reflect the collective intelligence of the people who voted for them. Some people might question whether that really works as well as we would like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great example, because if you're left out of the majority decision in a democracy, you don't feel very equitably served. So,
well, I think the purpose of collective intelligence and the way that Engelbart often will describe collective intelligence is the capability of a group of people to quickly and effectively solve problems.